carnivore diet, the pro-metabolic, and the vegan diet all get wrong? Stay tuned to this episode to find out. Welcome back, my friends. My name is Sarah. I am known as Carnivore Yogi. Thank you so much for being here and clicking on today's video. Today, I have a friend and returning guest. Her name is Heathar Shepard, and I know her from the quantum health world. Today, we are going to discuss all things diet and what all of these diets miss. Now, I want to throw in a little disclaimer before we get deep into this episode. I do think that someone who is metabolically unhealthy, metabolically deranged, can actually follow more of a carnivore style diet year round. Pro-metabolic diet, no. Vegan diet, no. But we're going to get into that in this episode. I just did want to clarify that before we really get deep into this episode so that no one really gets confused about how I feel about these things like limiting carbohydrates. But there is a deeper conversation that we really need to be having when it comes to our diet, when it comes to our circadian health and how those things actually influence our gut. The amount of people that come to me with gut dysbiosis, gut issues, all sorts of things is astounding. And if we just start fixing some of these low-hanging fruits, such as circadian rhythms, diet, things are a lot easier to manage. So we dive deeply into that in this episode. There are an absolute ton of timestamps down in the show notes. So if you want to jump around, we of course didn't just talk about diet. We talked about a bunch of other things as it relates to our health. One of the things that we really talked deeply about was circadian rhythms. These are my Viva Rays. This is what I use to protect my circadian rhythms. This is the 3-in-1 system. You have a base layer, which I've got here, and then you have the orange layer that is good to put on after sunset, or if you're walking around the house and it is before sunrise. And then the red layer, I put these on right before bed because as soon as they go on, I'm exhausted. I am ready to sleep. So thank you to Viva Rays for sponsoring today's episode. You can use my code YOGI to save 15% over at Viva Rays. Second sponsor is Optimal Carnivore. I actually just had my labs drawn for my 36-week appointment here during pregnancy. My doctor said, you know, so many women are anemic during pregnancy. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Your levels look amazing. So I use these grass-fed organ complex, and you can save by using my card Carnivore Y. Thank you guys so much for listening, and let's jump into today's episode. All right, everybody, thank you so much for coming back and tuning into the podcast. Today, I have a returning guest and a friend of mine, Heathar Shepard. We are going to talk about her new program called the Sunlight Diet and probably a few other things because there's so much always to talk about. But Heathar, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it's always my pleasure to be here. Happy to talk about the Sunlight Diet and whatever other shenanigans we get into for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the last time you were on, we'll just maybe like review a little bit and I'll link that down in the show notes if people want to go back and listen to that episode. I had so much amazing feedback on the episode. People were like, oh, I love Heathar. Just feel like I can learn so much from her. But you basically recovered from traumatic brain injury. You had some pretty significant health issues and were able to, instead of going like the allopathic medicine route, kind of go a different route. Can we do a quick little review of that before we jump into the other stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, when I was in my early 20s, I was in a bad car accident and smashed a telephone pole in two, hit my head, had a really bad concussion. And at that time in my life, I was very much in my physical body, training professional athletes. I just graduated college, was playing Division I basketball. And so that was my life for up until that car crash. I hit my head and CAT scans, MRIs, all clear. They were totally normal. And so like, yeah, go back to work. But I literally couldn't. Migraines and dizziness and vertigo. And literally I couldn't take a step without pressure coming into my brain. And for so many years, I tried so many different things. you just name like the therapy, and I've probably tried it, spent so much money on a lot of different modalities. And then literally it was like a 10-year struggle. And until I came across, I say that the two biggest modalities in my life have been sunlight and homeopathy, and also diet. But I feel like really what helped me make this huge transition with my healing was definitely sunlight and homeopathy for sure. So once I realized that 10 years in, it was the huge turnaround with my health. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Yeah, and we'll definitely link, excuse me, down in the show notes, the longer podcast where we really talk about that. But I don't know your opinion on this. Sometimes I get people kind of commenting or just going back and forth with this, but I honestly feel like if you start to make those changes with your circadian rhythms,
Yeah.
that all the other changes become easier, because most people go the diet route because it's
Yeah.
like kind of the low hanging fruit, which we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
But I feel like you're going to be able to get those neurotransmitters going, get out of that low dopamine state that maybe is keeping you stuck in a lot of those old eating patterns or habits. It's going to be a lot easier to make transitions if you follow something like, circadian rhythms, would you say?
Oh, 100%, 100%, because I always tell people that getting your circadian rhythms, your circadian biology into a healthier state is like the foundation that everything else builds upon. And you can try all of these different things, and they may even diet. It may, help. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling great a week in, maybe even a month in, and then you're like, you reach this like plateau and then almost go in the opposite direction again. And often until we have the circadian biology piece really solid, this solid like slab of foundation, you can't really build much off of that that's going to hold in place and stick in place until that happens. And you can do that with sunlight and your indoor light environment and even your diet. You can support your circadian biology using those elements for sure.
Yeah. So let's jump into this diet topic because I've talked about this a lot on other podcasts and just little solo episodes that we look at food, I think, too black and white. Now, I think you and I could both agree like a vegan diet is probably a poor choice of diets. I think we're all pretty much in agreement on that one. But when we look at diet, it's not just as simple as keto carnivore versus like pro-metabolic. I now knowing kind of what I know, I feel like there may be some definitely problems with pro-metabolic because of the deuterium aspect. There's a poor understanding of deuterium there, but even keto carnivore, needing to do those year round also. So what is your thought process or approach to diet when we look at it on a circadian or circannual type of viewpoint?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and it's a really important topic. Trendy carnivore going like hardcore one thing or another, or vegan is just like atrocious, of course. But when it comes to your circadian biology, if we're really wanting to support that, and if that's at the foundation and the heart of our health and our healing, then we have to look at how is diet involved in that. How is diet connected to our circadian biology? And we know that light is. And so we go out and we do the sunlight RX, or you practice your sunrise routine, and we support our circadian biology in that way. But we also our entire food chain is connected to sunlight as well. And so it would be much more supportive to our circadian biology and all the things you mentioned, our metabolic health, just overall health, if we also linked in this connection between, okay, sunlight grows our food, what's growing in my area, what season is it, what's the strength of the sunlight, what can it actually produce
Mm.
from the ground, and what's able to grow. And so um, it's really, really, we're going to have huge breakthroughs when we start to go back to our diet in this truly ancestral way. Our ancient
Mhm.
ancestors, they couldn't just, be eat the same thing 365 days a year. Just like it wasn't possible. It's not even
No.
realistic. It's not possible.
Mm-mm.
The sun angle changes, sunlight changes. Even if you live in the tropics, there's growing seasons and wet seasons and drier seasons. And this is like how we can improve our circadian biology even more when we make this connection, when we bring more importance to this real connection between sunlight, food, what grows in our region, etc.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I like. It sounds so silly, but I was like, what? So UV index, only certain foods can grow during that UV index, right? And
Yeah,
so does it make sense to be eating a pineapple in the middle of December, right? Like
yeah,
if you're living in Atlanta, like I am,
yeah.
does that even make sense at all?
Right, exactly. And if we can start shifting our mindset to these sort of things, because the grocery store makes this type of thinking just
Yep.
like we don't even need to think about this. We just go in,
Just
okay, we
come.
get organic, we get the fruits, we get the veggies, we get the grass fed, and that's like, everything's laid out there. And it doesn't matter what season it is, there's going to be bananas and fruits and squash and everything,
Hmm.
available to us. And so this food convenience has made it like we don't even have to consider the seasons. Like who cares? Like that's totally left our mindset. So um we have to really bring that back in, and like, you know, I encourage people to shop at their farmers markets because it
Yes.
kind of makes it more, much simpler and obvious as to what's growing in season. But this is a really interesting thing that I talk about, and it's called the sunlight diet, and it's something I just put out, which talks about diet in this way where it connects, like it has part one, which is circadian biology. What is it? Sunlight, what is it? How do you use it to heal? And then this whole dietary piece, which links these three really core um, aspects of health, of eating, of healing, of living. But one really huge part that I think has a lot of room for growth in terms of research and I guess just research would be the word here, is this link between sunlight and our gut microbiome and sunlight and what foods grow, and how sunlight changes our gut microbiome
Mm.
because of its rays in general, but also because of the type of foods it can grow. And this has a huge impact on the type of bacteria in our gut. And I talk about this in the sunlight diet, and one example I like to give is um, when you're in the heart of summer, you have these really like these foods that'll break down really easily. They're like
Hmm.
super compostable. They'll like, you leave berries on the counter for a few days and they'll like turn to mold. Or you have some sort of fruit or like a cucumber, it's like going to get squishy and it's going to go bad really quickly.
Yep.
These foods have more of like these simple carbohydrates in them that we've been taught to think are like, oh my god, avoid them, they're bad. But that's the type of light, that really strong UV light is producing those kind of mm, nutrients in the food. And so if we're out doing our circadian biology sunlight practice and we're simultaneously eating those foods, the gut microbiome is going to be very equipped to handling those foods, to being able to actually have the bacteria in place to absorb, assimilate, and utilize those foods.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the fall, when UV light starts to go away, we see a huge shift in what can be grown. We go from these simple sugars to these complex carbohydrates. We go to the like really robust squashes and the root veggies and these more complex carbohydrates. And when the sun shifts, the gut microbiome shifts as well. And the body becomes more equipped to handle these sort of foods as we get ready to go into winter. These foods that you keep them in your root cellar or your cellar or your fridge even, and they're gonna last like months.
Yep.
And of course, you know, we add in the standards, like always, the grass-fed and the wild caught and the healthy fats. But in terms of fruit and vegetable selection, which I feel like is probably the most confusing for people, like, you know, what kind of fruits and veggies to eat and when, I feel like that's totally off the radar. But if we can, you know, make this kind of connection again, I think people will have really huge health breakthroughs.
I think so too. I mean, just talking about sunlight and the gut microbiome, period.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge topic because the gut is such a huge topic these days, and everyone is investing in probiotics, investing in, you know, in fermented foods and this, that, and the other. And I don't see those fixing the problem for a lot of people. I mean, the issues people are having with like SIBO and H. pylori and just the number of gut issues that people reach out to me just on my Instagram page. I've got, you know, this, I've got that. What should I take? And I'm like, you got to get your circadian rhythms down first. And people are so like, oh, that's stupid. I got to DM somebody else that's dumb. Thanks. Bye.
Oh, those are the best.
Yeah. I don't think they don't typically say that, just to credit. Most people are nice and they're just like, okay, thanks. Moving on, you know, but maybe we could touch on that a little bit deeper, because I think this is a topic that I think people are just like, no, circadian rhythms and my gut health they have nothing to do with one another, but they really do, correct?
Oh, 100%. Like it's, of course the whole body does, but the gut is like huge in terms of circadian biology, because circadian rhythms, just think about how often you're supposed to have a bowel movement. Like there's a rhythm to it. There's a cycle to it. Like that, if you just know you're supposed to take a dump once a day, like at least, like
in the morning.
Right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's one thing, but also it's the gut's the largest storage tank that we know of right now for serotonin. And how do we make serotonin? In UVA sunlight. And serotonin is responsible for so many things, moving the stool down the track. It's responsible for our mood. It's responsible for actually producing certain beneficial microbes and bacteria. And if you're not in sunlight to stimulate that whole process, which sets your circadian biology, the whole thing's going to be thrown off. And you know, we talk about the mitochondria so much, but you know, the gut bacteria, mitochondria are also a form of bacteria. They're very much influenced by sunlight, cycles of night and day, and light and dark. It's absolutely huge. And we really destroy the gut microbiome in a lot of ways. And a couple of those ways are, as you mentioned, like if you're not in sunlight, your gut microbiome just simply isn't going to have the number of beneficial strains that it's supposed to have, because it's not getting that UV light or even red light that stimulates the production of all these different bacteria. So if you're just staying inside your home or working on your computer all day and you're not outside, right there, you compromise your gut microbiome just by that lifestyle. And I think there's been actually some studies, not that I really believe many studies, but I think a lot of them are done pretty poorly. But
Yeah.
I think there's at least been a handful showing that if you just are in an artificial blue light environment, your gut microbiome is, they use the word simplified. So there's just not as many strains, and there's more metabolic issues, because people talk about metabolic health all the time. There's there's several bacteria strains in your gut responsible for blood sugar regulation.
Mhm.
And that's just influenced by the type of light that we're around. And I don't know how deep you want me to go into that. I think people have
Yeah.
a good understanding of circadian biology on your show. Yeah.
I hope they I hope they do by now. I've been trying to reiterate that for the last year or so,
Yeah.
that the importance of it in our overall health. But yeah, I think that people underestimate, like I'm a little hot right now because I'm also like 35 weeks pregnant and I'm in the August heat out here.
Yeah.
But I've moved my podcast studio out here. Have the hard, the Ethernet line running out here,
I love it.
since the last time we did a podcast together, because I understand that I don't want to be stuck down in a dungeon,
Yeah.
with artificial light, and that is just not healthy for my body, period. I don't feel as good. I think people, once they actually just maybe even have that experience of, being outdoors a little bit more and being stuck
Yes.
indoors a little bit less, they're like, oh, I do feel better. I do feel less depressed. But
Yeah.
I don't know how many of them understand, like on a scientific level, like what's actually happening,
Yeah. I think when it just briefly, maybe if there's a new listener or something out there to your show when you're tuning into this, and especially when it comes to the gut microbiome, we've all heard of the gut brain axis.
Mhm.
And so when the light that hits your eyes, whether it's indoor light or it's sunlight, it's going to influence how the brain, the light that goes through the eyes and goes back into the brain and gives certain messages to the brain, how the gut brain axis communicates with each other. And it's going to be much more healthier, clear communication when you're just outside in a natural environment, and versus when you're inside under artificial light. The communication is going to be very different, and that communication is, okay, what bacteria do I produce, what time of day is it, what it influences, what should my feeding cycles look like, when should I be hungry, when should I not be hungry, when should I be sleeping, etc. So the main circadian hub for the body is really right behind the retina, and so the light that penetrates through your retina is going to influence the entire circadian cycle for the body, and that has a huge part to do with the gut microbiome. And the gut brain axis, I feel, is like huge in terms of this communication line between light and your gut, and then the food that you put into your gut.
Yep.
And then that communicates back with your brain. And so if you're putting the pineapple in January, but there's no UV light in, yeah, you're going to get brain fog, because you're going to maybe even a headache or feel like lethargic, because these are two different messages you're giving your body. There's no UV light, but wait, here's that light that's contained in your food, and now there's these mixed messages going on.
Yeah, I think that's a tough one for people because
Yeah.
they've never really been taught about food in that way. They've just been, like you said, we're so conditioned to just go to the grocery store, even like Whole Foods, which is quote unquote like a healthy place to go, which that is questionable.
Oh, so questionable. Yes.
I've got to do a post on it. I was just in there the other day and they had this like sign up there and it said, only the healthiest of ingredients. And then like underneath it was like these like all all natural organic, like corn chip snacks.
Amazing.
And I pick up the package that's like underneath this, like we use only the best and all natural ingredients. And it's like canola oil, like corn. I'm like, what in the hell universe is this? Like, this but people are not like weird like me that know that this is total BS and like crap. And they're okay, I'll buy this for my toddler. I'll buy this for my kids. This is a great healthy kid snack. I'm at Whole Foods. So we're so confused about like what is healthy, what is acceptable. Like I've been doing these posts about oat milk on my Instagram.
Yeah.
Girl, you would not. Why is oat milk not healthy? Like,
can you milk an oat?
Let's not put oats into a blender and then drink it. Like, why is that a good idea?
Good. Like, why is that even question of why would you? The thing is, why would you even think that was healthy?
Right.
Like that you could somehow turn oats into milk. That's like a healthy choice.
Right. And then if you buy the kind from the store, like the Oatly, it's got rapeseed oil in it, is like one of the first ingredients, which is straight canola oil.
Yes.
And sugar. And people are like, what do you mean that's not healthy? I'm like, oh my God, we have a lot of work to do.
A lot of work to do. A lot of work to do around this. And these are the people who are going to be like, what do you mean sunlight grows my food and I should eat according to the diet? Because they're eating, oat milk out of a box and the first ingredient is canola oil.
Right.
Like, we do have a long way to go.
Yeah, we do.
We have a long way to go. But some people are on point. They're kind of, up to speed.
I think my audience is open, they really want to do the right thing. And I think that's a lot of the messages that I get on my Instagram is people that are like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was bad. What should I do instead? Should I do almond milk? And I'm like, no, don't do that either. No almond milk, no soy milk. Like, if you cannot tolerate raw cow's milk, then just don't bother.
It's okay. Just don't eat it.
You don't need it. It's not essential to you. You could get some good grass-fed beef, wild caught seafood, some nice healthy bone marrow. Like, you don't need it, but we've just been so conditioned to think that, this is healthy, that is unhealthy. And we don't just get down to common sense. Like this conversation is like common sense, in my opinion. It's common sense to think like, okay, I'm in Georgia. It's August. We got watermelon right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to go sit outside and have some watermelon and enjoy the hell out of it.
Yeah.
December, do we have watermelon? No. We got steak.
Yeah.
We got the good fats. We've got other things, but we don't have watermelon in December. So it doesn't make sense for me to eat it at that point in time.
Absolutely.
Yes. And,
I hope that you're enjoying today's episode with my friend, again, and returning guest, Heathar Shepard. Our previous episode is linked down in the show notes if you want to take a look at that. And a quick reminder that all of Heathar's links, her podcast, which is very educational, very informative, as well as her website, her Sunlight RX program, all of her things are going to be linked down there in the show notes for you, along with those timestamps that will help you navigate through the show as well. And my Circadian Health for the Busy Person course is something that can help you regardless of where you live, the latitude that you live in. If you have small children, if you work in an office where being outside for sunrise or sunset can be a bit of a challenge, this course is really going to help you get started on your circadian health journey. And I wanted to very quickly thank one more sponsor of today's episode. This is Upgraded Formulas. Now, this is their magnesium, which I do like, but what I like even more, because you may not need this, is their hair tissue mineral analysis. I am just not a fan of taking supplements that your body does not need. That hair tissue mineral analysis is actually going to give you a picture of what's been going on in your body over the last 60 to 90 days, whereas a blood test is just a snapshot in time. And it's going to tell you if something acute, something that's dangerous, something that you need to take care of right away. that hair tissue mineral analysis with a consultation is going to give you a 60 to 90 day profile of what's going on. And I also recommend getting a consultation with that hair tissue mineral analysis. You can use my code YOGI or YOGI12 to save on that hair tissue mineral analysis with a consultation. That link is also going to be down in the show notes with the rest of my sponsors, Viva Rays for the Circadian glasses and Optimal Carnivore for those amazing organ meat capsules. All right. I thank you so much for watching today's episode. Let's go ahead and just jump right back into it. I had Dr. Laszlo Boros on my show recently. We had a pretty good 2-hour long conversation. And I really try to touch on this whole idea of deuterium because, like I mentioned earlier, like the pro-metabolic way of eating, I'm sure you've heard about that, is becoming really popular. People are going carnivore and keto, and they're doing it 365 days a year, and their adrenals and thyroids, and they're having issues, right? So they bounce all the way to pro-metabolic, where you eat, Mexican. Oops. Sorry about that.
You're good. It's okay.
Her phone went out. Sorry about that. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
I don't know what's wrong with this thing.
You're good. We didn't
Okay.
lose it at
All right. So anyway, sorry about that. My microphone is acting a little funky today. We could edit that part out. But basically, a lot of people are just saying like, this is the way that we're supposed to eat year round, is eating all this orange juice and fruit and all these things. So can you talk from your end a little bit about why that may not be the healthiest thing for people?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons for this, but I think if we bring it back to the gut microbiome piece and sunlight connection, it might make more sense. Because that I feel like this is also going back to the common sense, like you're saying, because the type of sunlight that's outside your door right now, that's the type of sunlight that's going to grow your food.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so that sunlight, when you're in it, you're doing your sunlight RX, you're outside, your skin and your eyes are exposed to that sunlight. You eat the foods that are growing in your region, and your gut microbiome, because of this gut-brain axis and the type of bacteria that the UV light stimulate, are going to be able to absorb, assimilate, utilize the nutrients in that food. It's going to be able to, UV sunlight depletes glucose from the liver. It helps deuterium deplete deuterium deplete your food. Because we know in summer, those watery fruits just have more deuterium in it. Is deuterium bad? No, not if you're getting sunlight and you're able to deplete these excess deuterium from your food. And some parts of the body, like the plasma, actually need higher amounts of deuterium than other parts of the body. So that's like one connection. But let's say now you're in the middle of winter, you're still getting some sunlight, or maybe you live in an area where you're like, Heather, I never see the sunlight, it never comes out in the winter. You're still going to give your body a message when you're outside. You go outside, you go for a walk, there's no UV light. When you eat foods that also are able to have this longer shelf life, they don't really require much UV light, they have that more complex structure. This is like a match. This is a match. Your gut microbiome changes. You're able to absorb, assimilate, utilize the nutrients in your food when you are getting the same sunlight that your food is also grown in. It's like so common sense and simplistic that people are like, what the hell? Like, no, tell me just what supplement should I take though? Wait a minute, no, but what about carnivore? Like, it's like, it's so simple. It's so, and some people are on board, they understand this. And let's just say, because some people are going to have this experience, you do all the right things for your circadian biology, you're in the sun, you're eating seasonally, and you still have issues. This is when, in my practice, then I go to, let's look at some of the things that may have compromised your gut microbiome from being able to heal and get over the hump here and like absorb and assimilate those foods. And the causes of that are very easy. it's too many antibiotics or too many suppressive therapies like vaccinations, or too many prescription medications or too many over-the-counter medications, all of which destroy the gut microbiome and the immune system, the gut in your gut, and prevent it from making real forward movement. So sometimes we have to, we lay the foundation with the circadian biology. Sometimes we have to go back in and do more of this deeper work to help clear the effects of those therapies, to allow your gut to actually be able to produce its own set of beneficial bacteria and restore the gut microbiome. So I want to mention that because maybe, people will listen in and they try it and they might see some improvements, or maybe they're like, shoot, I still have this, I still can't, I don't do well with fruit, or I don't do well with raw dairy. These things have to do with the type of bacteria in your gut. If you don't do well with a certain food, and I really want to bring this up because so many people will go and get a food sensitivity test today.
Oh,
For
those
the
are
love
so
of God,
popular.
stop. Don't waste your money on that. It's so stressful, because then you come home and you have this long of a page of foods to avoid, and then these supplements to take, and you have hundreds of dollars out the door with no real answer as to, well, why am I sensitive to those foods if that test is even accurate? And the cause is really simple. Either your circadian biology is off and needs some fine tuning, and or you've had too many suppressive therapies, and those need to be cleared so your body, your gut, your immune system can come back into balance and start being able to eat these foods that are, our earth, our nature naturally provides us with.
Yeah, I know I'm going to get that in the comments, and I know people will reach out and say, okay, well, I'm doing that, because I do get that. I get people like, well, I was doing circadian biology, I was doing this, I was doing that, and I still had, I had one woman say, I still had a stroke, I still had this, I still had that.
Yes.
Well, yeah, because there sometimes has been a lot of prior damage that's been done to the system,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, and most people, just because of how our world and our medical system is set up, has absolutely had prior damage. Who hasn't taken an antibiotic or several rounds, or who hasn't been fully vaccinated, or, et cetera. And so I'm bringing these things up because they have a suppressive effect on the immune system. And a large part of the immune system is located in the gut. So when we suppress the immune system, sure, we won't get acute infectious diseases like a cold, like a fever, a bad flu, high fever. We won't get these things, but ever since we brought in these suppressive therapies, we don't get these huge, really intense acute things anymore. We don't, how many adults have had a fever of 103 or 4? No, the immune system literally can't go there because it's been suppressed so much. And so that affects your gut microbiome too. It's the terrain, if we want to use a word that people use a lot, is totally destroyed by these therapies. So in order to heal some of these things, because I get this all the time, people have gone to this person and that person with a big name and tried all these supplements and diets. They've done the circadian biology and they're like, what the heck? I've done all the right things. And until we can, I use homeopathy to help remove these suppressive effects of these suppressive therapies. And, before we even hopped on the episode, I'll keep the person anonymous, but this person's been struggling with IC, interstitial cystitis, forever, has spent literally about $100,000 to try to help it. And we do one homeopathy session together because she's done all the circadian biology. She's done the diet. She does everything correctly. But this person has had so many suppressive therapies over the course of her life that her immune system is just constantly bombarding her with these symptoms. And if this person could just strengthen her immune system, there'd be a huge breakthrough. We do one session, give one homeopathic remedy. She literally took 10 pellets and has felt the best she's ever felt in years from the interstitial cystitis, because that remedy was able to start to remove the suppressive therapies from her immune system and finally give her immune system some strength and relief to get over the hump. So now all the circadian biology stuff she's doing is going to help her have a huge breakthrough when you combine these two things. And I want to mention that just because, like you said, many people try so many of these things, and sometimes we need a little extra, because the medicines we've had over the course of our lives have been they're so strong. They're very strong medications, and they really impact our health. People think, oh, I take a round of antibiotics, I'll do probiotics for a week and then I'll be good. Those effects stay for your life until you're able to reverse those effects using something like homeopathy. So I want to mention that, because a lot of people can hit that stick, that plateau, and then go back down and just be so pissed off that they do everything, and they're still like, oh my gosh, like I just give up. It can get to this place because we're not told that the therapies that we're given, the medications, have this kind of effect on the immune system, and it sets the stage for all of our chronic issues today.
I agree. I mean, there's just literally no informed consent at all. And it's like, now that I'm having another baby, it's like I'm doing everything different. I've found a provider that is on the same page with me for the child, for my child. I didn't think about any of that stuff with my daughter. I wish I had 15 years ago. Her life might be completely different now, but we're just like the food stuff. Like, I'm just going to go to the grocery store and get the cereal and the oat milk and it'll be fine. We do the same thing with our health. I'll just find a doctor. If I get sick, I'll take the antibiotics, take the prescription for this, for that. And we don't question it. And then we wonder why, okay, now I'm ready to get better. I want to do circadian biology, eat the right diet, and then they are like, well, why is this not working? Because we've followed the allopathic medical model and allopathic food model for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And it's hard to just undo that overnight. Not saying that it cannot be done, because I absolutely believe it can be. But I don't think people realize how sick we are as a society, and it goes far, far beyond the diet, far beyond the diet.
I mean, I think that's a really good point to bring up, just because we've been so conditioned in both with our food, with our medical choices. There's so much conditioning around that we don't even, like, we think now that getting a fever is a bad thing. People are terrified of it. People are absolutely, and just everything.
Take Tylenol immediately.
Immediately. 99, take a Tylenol. It's like, that's your body's main way of detoxing toxins, germs, chemicals. If you can't get a high fever, you can't detox that well. Your body, your immune system, there's things just accumulate and build up. I've worked with a lot of people who have cancer. Most of them have no idea last time they got a high fever, like no idea. And this is why, because all of these toxins build up over time and the body can't get rid of them, because they can't get that high fever to quite literally burn up the germs or the metals or the toxins or whatever it may be in their body. And so now we're like, especially the past few years, a fever, just forget it. It's like immediately I'm gonna die.
Right.
It's like, we have to be trained on how do we act in these situations. Like, you don't just have to like strong arm it, and like, there's other things you can do to support yourself when you're in that situation. Then take a children's Tylenol, or a Tylenol ourselves, or go to the doctor and get like a shot to reduce your fever. It's really, of course, there are emergency situations where you have to act on, okay? Like, this is, we have to use common sense, and of course, but for the most part, we totally overdo the anti-fevers, the any Western meds. We really overdo it because we haven't been trained on how to do it a different way. And a different way we've been told is like witchcraft or dangerous or other horse shit that they've made up about it. So there's a real effect that these therapies also have in your circadian biology, which I think is a huge room for improvement and growth with our learning around circadian biology. How do antibiotics change your gut microbiome that work in light and dark cycles and produce certain bacteria when you're in that light, but then you destroy that with the antibiotics, and your gut's no longer able to make certain bacteria. It's a whole thing, an area where there's a lot of room for growth in this community, for sure.
Yeah, it's sad to me that, a lot of people don't correlate a lot of these things like childhood chronic ear infections with some of these suppressive therapies,
Oh my gosh. And yes.
And then it continues to feed like a loop, it's crazy because it's like you do a suppressive therapy, and then now all of a sudden you have a little one that is chronically getting ear infections that you're treating with antibiotics, and then they get another ear infection, and then you got to go more antibiotics, and it continues, and I've had to deal with that with my daughter, and we've had to do so many things to try to detox her from all that stuff. I mean, we've got the Magnetico sleep pad, and did like we did chelation along with when she started doing the Magnetico, and like we've tried to do a lot of things to try to reverse that damage, but it's hard. It's really, really hard. And parents, again, like, we just want to do the right thing. That's all that people want to do, is the right thing. And so I don't want anyone listening to this to feel bad, because that's the messages I get from mothers who are like hysterical, who've been giving their kids oat milk, which I'm just like, honey, calm down a little bit. Like, we don't need to be you don't need to be crying because you give your child oat milk. Just stop doing it.
We've all made bad choices. I mean, let's be real.
Don't buy it anymore.
Yeah.
But when you know better, you do better.
That's right.
And that's really all you can do. You can't go back and undo what has been done. Can't not do those things. But it's tough, because I do think people really, really do want to do the right thing. And the voices are so strong. I mean, I even still with my husband have discussions about like the new baby, and he's like, well, what if he wants to play sports? And I'm like, well, we live in Georgia, we can sign waivers. And he's like, well, what if they won't take the waiver? I'm like, well, then he's not fucking playing. Sorry. Excuse my language, but sorry. I'm not willing to risk my child's health after what I've been through with one for a sport or for whatever. It just is not worth it to me, because you see the pain that your child goes through, and it's really hard to watch that and be witness to it and know that it could have been prevented. So
it's a good point. And I think I'm really glad you mentioned the part about like, absolutely don't feel bad about any of these things. We've all been conditioned and had to, like myself, I've had to recondition myself around all of these things, around suppressive therapies and diet and sunlight. And it's like, it's always a work in progress. It's always, life is just this it's a continual healing process. And so, it's exactly like you say, when you know better, you do better. And this is why podcasts like this are so awesome, because you hear something that maybe you've never heard before and you're like, holy shit, like I've totally been neglecting that part of my healing. I haven't even considered it. And now you can. And it's like, we are always going to be like having these realizations and insights around our body, our health. And so yeah, try not to beat yourself up too bad. Like I was vegetarian for like 7 years and practically destroyed my hormones until I realized like, oh, let's see what's going on here, when I was a teenager, and it was just horrible. And that's what I knew. That's what I thought was best at the time. So I did it. And I was like, now I know that that's a really poor choice for my health and for the environment. And, there's so many pieces to that. And I want to tie this back in because I think this is something you can bring into your own life, or if you have kids, with your own kids, because when you start this cycle of the suppressive therapies, like you're mentioning, like you get the ear infection and then you get another ear infection, or that one doesn't go away and antibiotics stop working, you get to a point where the kid or the adult no longer has that issue, but some sort of deeper issue then results. That's how you know you suppressed whatever that thing was, the ear infection or the strep throat or whatever the eczema, and then a deeper issue happens. Like suddenly they have behavioral issues, or they have nightmares and they have anxiety, or they have wicked constipation. As each time you suppress, the pathogen goes into deeper layers, and it's like burying something 10 feet down, and then 20, and then 30. And it's going to take a lot more time to pull that thing up by its roots, the more those, we throw suppressive therapies at those sort of things. So, this is one reason why I suspect school violence and shootings have gotten so out of control, because these kids have so many vaccinations, so many suppressive therapies, and then you throw all the crappy nutrition on top of it and the blue light. It's like these kids, their neurotransmitters, their brains, and is just destroyed from such a young age.
It's wrecked. Yeah. And you give them a phone when they're toddlers, to get them to shut up.
Yeah.
Like that's one thing I see. I'm like, oh my God, there's a 2-year-old playing, with their mom's phone because mom needs the 2-year-old to like calm down, and it's heartbreaking because I don't think the mom knows any better. I think the mom is thinking, what's the harm of giving my child my phone so I can get these things done around the house, but their brain is not developed.
Yes.
And, so you're throwing all these chemical assaults on the child, and then the fact that their brain is not formed properly and allowing them to be around that amount of radiation, and I mean, I don't want to sound like an old person, but I feel like kids these days are pretty damn mentally ill on the whole.
Yeah. No, really. Yeah.
I'm like, we didn't have all these all these different specifications and diagnoses and all this stuff when I was growing. It wasn't that way. We didn't have cell phones though,
Yeah.
I had a pager in high school.
That's amazing.
I'm just remembering that the other day. I'm like, I remember I had my pager. I was like 16. I'd be at work and I'd get a page from one of my friends, and be like, oh. We didn't have all this stuff though. And it was so much. I look back on that and I'm like, God, that life was a lot simpler before we brought in all these things,
So much simpler.
Yeah.
I think this is good because, when it comes to our brain, these things also, like, think about how much we had to think about driving somewhere that we didn't know before cell phones.
Oh God.
And we had to like navigate the landscape.
Right.
And like, oh, did I pass that tree? Did I pass this thing? And like, you know, we would use landscape as our landmarks, like, oh, you pass the rock, you pass the waterfall, or, you know, you pass this store. Now it's like we don't even think about our surroundings. We don't have to
Right.
memorize phone numbers, you know, and it's really making that's a whole other aspect of brain development that's just completely been
Gone.
removed.
Yeah, completely removed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the whole bit of it that we don't. There's so much that I feel like is just like laziness now.
Yeah.
You know, we weren't even allowed to use calculators. We had to do like the
Yeah.
timetables, like in 60 seconds, see how many of these you can do, like the math
Yeah.
problems. I don't know if they still do those or not. I have no idea, but
Yeah.
like it was just different because there were no calculators, computers, none of that stuff. And I mean, technology is not all
Right.
bad. I think that there's
Right.
definitely some good things to it, but I think on a
Absolutely.
whole, it has not helped our kids at all, you know? Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
been really damaging to our kids for sure.
Yeah.
I started doing this thing where, because we go on road trips a lot, and I'll like buy a map as where we're going.
Oh, nice.
And this is how we used to do it. Like I need
Yeah.
to retrain myself. It's the
Yeah.
same thing. When you know better, you do better. And this, like,
Yeah.
I'm buying a map, and you know, just
I
to
love
at least
it.
like see the route, like where are we going, like just to like use my brain in a different way, because we've been so used to Google Maps and like just like Siri, tell us what the fuck to do. And it's like
Right.
we have lost, you know, I think this kind of ties into what we're doing, just this common sense.
Yeah.
When the convenience comes in, you got the Whole Foods and this foods any time of year, and your fever and the antibiotic. And it's like they've removed us from this ability to make any type of choice. They've
Yeah.
made all the choices for us and made it
Yeah.
really simple, so we don't think
Right.
in other ways.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I noticed when I started watching sunrise every day and sunset, I know where north, south, east, and west is.
Yes.
And it's astounding to me how many people don't know, like, that way's east, that's west, you know,
Yes.
like,
I know.
because I remember when I was younger, someone was giving me directions. This was before the internet and everything. Go
Yeah.
north at that, blah, blah, blah. I'm like,
Yes.
which way is north, you know?
Right.
But
Right.
when you understand, when you're in tune with like cycles of nature,
Yeah.
you know which way is north, south, and east and west. But I don't think most people could even tell you where, you know, where does the sun rise? You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
what direction is that, you know, and
Yeah.
where actually is that? I don't know that many people even have that awareness these days. And I think
know.
it is important. I think it does have to do with our health. Maybe that I
Yeah.
sound a little crazy, but I do think it's a health consideration to know where you are in
Yeah.
space.
Yeah. And I think it's a health consideration. I feel like because we've literally shut a part of our brain off that we've had hardwired in us since we were put on this planet. Like you're out in the forest, or like when we go way back when we had to navigate the landscape and where we are, those people would have been, you know,
Yeah.
dead in the water if they didn't know where they were. Or it's like this part of our biology that we've just like, you know, ask Alexa or Siri or,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
these
Exactly.
sort of things. So I think it has a lot to do with, we've just cut that neural pathway, like we're just
Yep.
separating it out of our biology. And you know, you don't have to go out and buy all your maps, but at least like maybe have your kids try to memorize some phone numbers, or
Right.
you know, like
Yeah.
we have a landline in our house, and I'm like, okay, like
Yeah.
I'm gonna memorize.
People freak out when I tell them, do not sleep with your phone in your bedroom.
Yeah.
Do
Oh.
that. And they're like, well, you must not have teenagers. You must not have relatives that count on you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you can have a landline. If people really, really need you in the middle of the night, they call your landline. You know, like that still actually does exist for now.
Yeah, for now
It may not in 10 years, but
yeah.
you know, you can do that, but probably sleeping with the phone next to your head is a very poor choice.
Oh, that's a
your health.
really poor choice for your health.
Yeah.
I mean, really poor choice. I highly recommend a landline, highly. It's like, and it's so unpopular that it's like $30 a month or 40.
Right.
So it's like, hardly anything, and you can, call anywhere, in the
Yeah.
country. So it's like, and then you don't have like the EMFs coming from it that and alone will mess up your circadian biology and when you're trying to sleep. And then you got all the, if your phone's on, if it's not on, if it's off of airport and if it's on, it's going to be constantly looking for Wi-Fi signals from your neighbors, from cell towers around you. Whether you live in a place with cell service or not and your phone's on, it's going to constantly be looking and sending that, trying to communicate back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates a lot of dirty EMFs. It's really intense. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have my phone on airplane mode inside a Faraday bag. Like, just airplane mode's not even like good for me anymore.
I know, I agree.
I can't. If I'm like in the car, I have on a belly band. Like I'm just, I don't know. People think I'm insane, but.
Well, I hear you. They think I'm insane too. And I'm like, every month I get closer to be like, I am literally gonna buy a digital camera and just upload my photos to like Instagram, because it's a main platform I use to connect with people.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna get rid of my phone. I'm just gonna get rid of it. We just bought a little farm in northern New Mexico. There's no cell service.
Oh, nice.
There's like, it's all gonna be hardwired Ethernet. I'm not even gonna be able to use the damn phone. So I'm like, maybe this is a sign to like, just fucking get rid of that appendage. I feel like we need like an AA for cell phones these days.
We do. It's a major addiction. I mean, it really is. Yeah. People are very attached to their phones. And yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's definitely tough because you do need to stay connected to family, to friends, all that stuff. And but then then there's an abuse factor too. And if we're going to have our kids try to have our little children not on phones, then us modeling it is not okay either, because then they see us doing it and they're like, well, then I should be able to, that I should be able to do that too. So it goes deep. It goes deep.
It goes deep. Yeah. At least practice some safe practices and try not to give them to your kids. And even if your phone's on and on airport, it's going to be emitting some sort of radiation.
Exactly. They can still track you, because everyone was freaking out about this Instagram. They can track my location and hackers can find me or whatever. And I'm like, y'all are just now. Like, because everyone was posting it and reposting it. I'm like, y'all are just now getting that memo. Like, location services have been off on my phone. Dictation's been off on my phone for a long time. I haven't done any upgrades on it. I refuse to do the upgrade because then it won't let me turn off the 5G. Like, it's usually on airplane mode in a Faraday bag, because that's the only way that you're not trackable with your phone, is if it's literally in a Faraday bag and it's cut off completely, the signal. Otherwise, they know where you are. They know what you're doing at all times. So I think, but the amount of shock that people were like, oh my God, they can track my location. I'm like, that's kind of been a thing for a while.
It's
I
think, like, because we're talking about some different aspects of health today. And this, I think, is a big one, because just more so if we think about how we have conversations and relate to other people. You go into a restaurant today, you go into a store, and like a couple are there, or like a family. Every person is on their device. Nobody is interacting with each other. And it's like, people are forgetting how to socialize, how to have community, how to interact with each other, how to talk about things, and it's just become this, we've completely are numbing our brains literally. And this is a huge part of health. How communicating with other people, how to problem solve with other people, how to talk things out, how to talk out your feelings. No, we'll just look at our phone and like order our meal and like we'll just scroll whatever, you know, and it's like that's a huge health consideration in and of itself also.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we could keep going down these rabbit holes, but I definitely want to point people towards your new PDF, your new resource for food, for understanding circadian rhythms, and then this whole topic of circadian eating that somehow got down all these rabbit holes. But I think starting with those things is huge. You know, I think starting to make those changes is really huge. And then once you get your dopamine back to normal levels again, you start waking up and looking around, you know, you can make some of these other changes. But I love this resource you've created, and I'll definitely make sure to link it below. Anything else you want to add into the conversation around this stuff?
No, I think it's been a very diverse and unique and fruitful conversation. And I think it speaks to this healing is so multifactorial and there's so many layers to consider. And we tend to get really pigeonholed into this diet and this supplement and avoid these things that this test said. And it's like healing in life is just not that linear. There's so many more layers. It's so complex. So the sunlight diet is a great place to start because it helps to reunite you, reconnect you with nature, with sunlight, and then making this whole connection with your food source in your area. And it teaches you how to individuate your diet, where you're living, and not according to a food test, but according to like nature, seasons, sunlight, how to make different food choices throughout the year that support your circadian biology. So you can go to my site, heatharshepard.com, and you'll see, you can get a copy of the sunlight diet there. And I guess the other thing I would mention is if anybody's like, I'm really interested in healing, and you've mentioned some interesting things about suppressive therapies and homeopathy. I have just started a homeopathy school, and I'm getting ready to launch the next school the next year, this September. And so you can go to studyclassicalhomeopathy.com to if you're like, I'm curious about that, I want to learn more about that. So you can check that out if that's something that spoke to you as well.
Fantastic. And I'll link all that in the show notes for everyone so they can find it. And this has been awesome. Thank you so much, Heather. I really appreciate your time today. And as always, it's been really fun to chat.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me on. And I hope everyone enjoyed the conversation and benefited, and don't feel like you have to do all the things at once.
Right.
Like, just start with where you are. We talked about a little bit of different things here, and you know, it's just such a cycle and progression, and you know, just go in step.
Yeah, absolutely.